Hey, yo, what up? Welcome to the Sunday sermon with Mike, your mentor, here to drop some wisdom on you. Thank you for tuning in. If you're watching the replay, I appreciate you guys tuning in as well. I just want to say thank you guys for all the sharing that you do of these videos. Um, this is important, right? And words don't do this justice. Just had an interaction this weekend with a brother, who was explaining that they were coming out of a rough situation. They were coming out of a divorce, and they were reflecting on their life and their upbringing, and they were never shown what it was like to be a good husband. They were never shown what it was like to be a good father. Now, obviously, I don't know all the context for that, but I do know, they weren't shown directly. They, like all of us, had influences from the outside, and God's good at dropping us hints and bringing people into our lives that can make these things clear and show us these things if we're looking and we're paying attention. But a lot of times, we're not, just because of all the distractions and other things that we got going on in the world. And sometimes when you're young, you don't, unless you're actively seeking that out, you're not going to pay attention to that. So I just thought it was interesting. It's like every conversation that, not every, but a lot of the conversations that I'm having with guys just in general throughout my day and throughout my life, God just keeps bringing it back to this thing, right? Like manhood. Like, what does manhood look like? How do you know when you're a man? And how, as men, are we supposed to learn these things? And that's what this page is about, right? It's me taking all the wisdom that I've been able to glean and have sown into me over the years by lots of different men, and sharing that with others so that we can all learn together, because you don't know what you don't know. And when you grow up and you're not shown what it's like to be a good husband, when you're not shown what it's like to be a good father, when you're not shown how real men are supposed to act, you're left to figure that stuff out on your own. And you can do a lot of damage to yourself and a lot of damage to others by trying to do that. So you guys sharing these videos and helping me spread this word is extremely important. Wisdom has no bias. It has no prejudice. It doesn't discriminate based on age, sex, creed, color, religion, any of that stuff. Right? It's applicable to all men. But it's not good enough to just have the wisdom up here, right? You got to get the wisdom from here into your heart. And sometimes that 18-inch journey can be one of the hardest journeys to make. But the good thing is we're not alone. We've been given resources, and by you guys watching these videos, you're taking that information and allowing God to move in your heart and to speak to you in His own way about what you need out of all this stuff. Everything isn't going to pertain to everybody, but there's going to be something that is going to thanks, Chuck. Yeah, a lot of people sewed into me, so that's where that came from. And when I was younger, like, the crazy thing is, I don't think I shared this story before. I clearly remember this. I was sitting at my grandparents' counter, and I was reading my Bible, and I was reading about Solomon. And they said the dude was rich. They said he was the richest dude that ever lived. It said that he was the wisest person that ever lived. And it said that if you wanted the same type of wisdom that he had, all you had to do was ask. Now, I don't remember my motives in doing that, but, I asked, that for that same wisdom. And I didn't really know what maybe I was going to get myself into, because I think a lot of gaining wisdom means you have to go through tough things, and experience can be the best teacher for that, for good things and for bad things. But once again, I appreciate you guys sharing all this. There's some cool stuff coming down the pipe because of this and you guys' willingness to share. I can't speak about it right now, but trust me, when the time is right, I will tell you. So I'm eternally grateful for you guys helping me get this message out and know that it's making a difference all around the world. In lots of different countries, guys are watching this, women are watching this, and it's helping them in a lot of different areas. Because we're just not taught this stuff, right? I don't know why. We've just gotten so far away from these things because there's other things out in the world that we focus on, right? Like how we're going to pay our bills, how we're going to, raise our family, how we're going to, what job are we going to choose, what career are we going to choose, a multitude of all these things that distract us from thinking about these key things. And, I want to bring this back to where this is one of the key things that is taught to men as they grow up, so that we can change not only our generation but the generations to come, especially in the West, because there is no rite of passage for men. There's all these different examples and these different ideas of what that looks like, and like I said before, when you're left to figure that out on your own, you can cause a lot of destruction along the way. So tonight is the Sunday sermon, and if you're new to this page, this is the way that it works. When God gave me this idea 3 years ago to do this, and I resisted and fought and denied it for a long time. And when I finally got sick and tired of seeing people take their lives, men take their lives to suicide, something stirred inside my heart, and I was hurt. I was pissed. And God said, well, what are you going to do about it? And I told him I didn't know. And he said, remember that idea that I told you about? And that's what led to this, right? Me posting every single day here on this page, sometimes going live. And God gave me all this content to cover for every single day. And so tonight, the Sunday sermon, it started off with me sharing about my life and all the stuff that I've been through, all the trials and the things that I've dealt with that have given me a lot of this wisdom that God's poured into me. But now it's progressing, since there's only so many things in my life that I can talk about, because I'm only 38 years old. Into bigger life lessons that God wants to remind us of and wants us to know. Yeah, if you don't know anything about me and you're new to this page, a quick intro. Well, hi, my name's Mike King. I grew up without a father. For the first 10 years of my life, he was in and out of prison. When he got out, he disappeared. He suddenly reappeared when I was about 14/15 into my life. I was ecstatic, like I think every young boy would be, that your dad's there and he's gonna watch you play sports. He's gonna throw the football with you in the yard. He's gonna, do stuff guys do, together, that fathers are supposed to do with their sons. Teach you about life, teach you things. And that lasted about 6 minutes or 6 months. Seemed like 6 minutes. And one crazy night, he got high and threw a rock through the front window, and my mom called the police, and he was back into the wind. And that set up the next 5, 8 years of my life of a repeating pattern of him being gone, showing back up on the scene, promising he'd be there and he'd never leave, and then disappearing again. And every 2 years, he'd kind of pull that same routine until finally and you know, the last year when I graduated from college, he died, and I had to face some hard truths. You know, one of them is you know, I was left to figure life out on my own on that aspect without a father, and what does that look like for me? What does it look like to be a good husband? What does it look like to be a good father? What does it look like to be a productive man in society? And I had some ideas because there was other men who had sowed seeds into me, but that that journey wasn't complete. It's not complete to this day. But because there was pieces missing, I caused hurt. I caused destruction in some areas of my life and in some areas of other people's lives. Um, so here I am now, and I'm just sharing my life with other men because I don't want to see them make the same mistakes that I made. And two, I don't want them ultimately to give up on so many things: their marriage, their kids, and their lives. So that's what I'm doing, and this is my part of I don't know, leaving a legacy, doing something about it, trying to make the world a different place. Because I kept my mouth shut for too long. For 38 years, I didn't say a word unless it was in private conversations. Um, and now I've been called to go on social media and share this. So the rest is in God's hands. I'm just doing what He's asked me to do. So tonight, let's jump into the Sunday sermon and get into what this looks like here and get you guys out of here. All right. So, Sunday sermon, episode 23. Wow, 23 weeks already. Woohoo! Yeah, going strong. What is God saying? You know, I get this question, I wouldn't say often, but I get it enough from people, you know, and they ask me, well, like, how do you hear from God? Like, how do you know God's speaking to you? Like, what does that look like? Right? There's this confusion. There's this unknown, especially if you're, you know, if you're not a believer, if you don't believe in Jesus Christ or the Bible, like I do. So tonight, I'm gonna talk about that a little bit. So I guess before I jump into this, you know, I can honestly say, and I've said this, or I've told these stories on this channel before, so you can just go back and look at them. But I've heard God's audible voice twice in my life. In both times, it was extremely profound. The first time is when I shared the story of me partially confessing what I had done to my wife 2 weeks into our marriage, and God telling me to follow her wherever she went, because I had made a covenant, not a promise, a covenant between Him and between her. The second time, or that was the second time, the first time was actually at my dad's funeral when uh, I walked up to his casket and don't even remember what I said, just remember going back and sitting down and being so angry and overwhelmed with sadness, not because he was dead, but because he knew virtually nothing about me. And that just, it freaking hurt like no other. And I sat there with my hands, my head in my hands, down in my lap, and I just cried, and I just clenched my fist up, and I just got angrier and angrier. And all of a sudden I heard God's voice clear as day, like someone was right beside me. And in my mind I was going, this person knows nothing about me. This man knew nothing about me. Like my father knows nothing about me. And God's voice said to me, I know everything about you. And instantly my, what's the word I'm looking for? Not posture, come on. Instantly, my countenance changed. I felt love. I felt overwhelming joy. I felt overwhelming peace. It's really undescribable. The way that I felt confident and reassured to hear that, and it was amazing. Now, God's spoken to me other times in my life, sometimes very clearly, and sometimes not so well on my own because of my own issues. Not the message hasn't been so clear. So, what are some of the other ways that God speaks to you? You know, some of those ways could be on your mind's eye, right? Gives you a picture, right? Another way is the thoughts that come to you. The Bible says to take every thought captive, and the reason you have to take every thought captive is because there's three types of thoughts. There's your thoughts, there's God's thoughts, and then there's the enemy's thoughts. And you need to learn and train yourself to distinguish between all three of those. And perfect example, like I said a couple minutes ago, about God speaking to me and God downloading information to me was when I was putting this together. I mean, I had a general idea of some of the things that God wanted me to talk about, but literally, He gave me the content for every single day of every single week for this whole year and what that needed to look like. And He led me to various tools and He reminded me of various notes that I had taken on different things, right? Like, because the crazy thing about this is, like, I've been taking notes on my phone about a lot of this stuff for a number of years, and I don't know why. I've always liked to take notes. I always like to sometimes refer back to them, and God just started bringing all these things back to me to help me with this. Other ways that God has spoken to me is through dreams. Some people have visions. Now, the difference between a dream and a vision is, or they say, or what my understanding is, a dream is when you're asleep, right? And you're dreaming, and you can see the colors and smells and all of that. And then a vision is my understanding is when you're awake, like a daydream, right? And I can't think of any time that God's spoken to me through a vision, but I know some people that have experienced that. And then the other way, and the most common way that God speaks to me, is in a small, still voice in the back of my mind, right? And it's very quiet. It's very gentle. It's very loving. And let's talk about the difference between your voice, the enemy's voice, and God's voice. God's voice is always encouraging. God does not shame you. God does not make you feel guilty, right? That doesn't mean that God won't bring up stuff that you've done wrong, but the way that He brings it up to you is in a very loving way. And He shows it to you and shows you where you're wrong so that He can help you correct that for your own benefit. If you hear words like, "Oh, you're so stupid. How could you ever do that? I can't believe you did that. Why would you make that mistake? Why would you say that? There goes your mouth again." Those are all condemning type things, and those are coming from the enemy. Those, sometimes they can be from you, your own voice, right? Because we can be very self-critical. But God's voice doesn't do any of that. God's voice lifts you up. God's voice builds you up. God's voice encourages you. God's voice calls you to something higher than what you currently know and what you're currently experiencing, right? A higher expectation, a higher calling. All right. So that's that for the warm-up. Now let's talk about, I think it's 4 on here, 4 keys to hearing God that are very critical. The first one, in God speaks to me all the time. He's always speaking to me. He's always showing me things every day. People will probably wonder, like, well, how is that? Like, how is that possible? It's possible for a lot of reasons in the 4 that we'll go over here, but you know, the difference between Christianity, no, sorry, the difference between having a relationship with Jesus Christ of the Bible versus any other religion, versus any other belief out there, is God wants to have a relationship with you. It's not about you doing anything to get to his level. It's actually quite the opposite. It's about him coming down and meeting you right where you're at and having that relationship, just like you would with any other person. Except this person is so loving, this person is so encouraging, this person wants the best for you. They know what's best for you. Now that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean it's going to be cupcakes and puppies and money raining from heaven. No. Because there's a lot of things that we need to be taught along our journey, not only for our good, but for the good of others. I never would have wanted my brother to commit suicide. I never would have wanted my dad to leave us multitude of times and make those promises, and then die of stage 4 liver cancer. I never would have wanted any of that. And I don't know fully why all those things happen, but I do know that God is so good that he's using those things that happened in my life to make a positive difference in other people's lives. Because he loves me, and he loves you, and he loves them. So I say all that to say that I have that relationship. God wants to have that relationship with me, with us, and we need to talk to him just like we would talk to any other person. The Bible calls it prayer. Simply just speaking to God. Sometimes it's crying out to God, sometimes it's asking him things, sometimes it's expressing gratitude for things, right? It can look a lot of different ways, but I'm a firm believer that you should be doing that every day throughout your entire day. So the first thing that you want to do if you want to hear God clearly is you have to ask him to spend time with you. Now, why is that? Why doesn't God just open up the heavens and with a loud trumpet voice dictate to you whatever it is that he wants you to know? Well, the reason is God's a gentleman. He's giving you free will. He's not gonna usurp that and force his way in to tell you something, right? Now, he may intervene and use other people or other ways to try to get that message across, which is funny because it reminds me of this simple little story about these people who went down at sea and they cried out to God and they said, God, we're going to die, rescue us. And a boat comes by, right? And they said, do you need help? And they're like, no, we're waiting on God to rescue us, just go, we'll be fine. Then another boat comes by, right? And this happens 3 times and they do the same thing. Finally they die and drown. They go to heaven and the first thing they say to God is, God, why didn't you help us? And he said, I sent you 3 boats, right? So we need to ask God to spend time with us, right? Invite him in. And God is faithful. I know God to be faithful. God has been so faithful to me my entire life, even when I did not deserve it. All the crap that I've been through, all the bad choices that I made, all the times He tried to warn me not to do things and I still went ahead and did it out of my own selfishness, right? He still wants to spend time with me. He still wants to tell me things. He wants to reveal things to me. He wants to build me up. He wants to strengthen my identity. And it's not just for me, it's for you. It's for all of us. But the first thing that we need to do is we got to ask God to spend that time with us. And like any good father, He's going to do that with His children because He loves us. The second thing that we need to do is we need to eliminate distractions. And I can tell you, see this thing right here? That thing? This is the biggest distraction that we have in our lives. Bar none. The biggest distraction. And while this does a lot of good, it probably equally does just as much bad. Right? All the notifications we have on this thing, all the times we're bored, right? And we pick it up, looking to be entertained, looking to fulfill some sort of need, get some sort of pleasure. And don't think that that's not engineered like that. I mean, maybe you haven't seen, I think it was last year, when one of the original investors of Facebook came out and talked about how it was purposely engineered to give your brain that dopamine hit, right? So they could keep you in that cycle of going back and checking. And that's the purpose of all those notifications. That's the purpose of all those likes, right? That stuff's addicting because it goes back to what I talk about on this page. And that's one of the core basic fundamental needs that we have as humans is to be chosen. And nothing expresses that more than to have someone like what we post, have someone comment what we post on. And every time that we get that little bit of fulfillment, that little bit of dopamine hits off in our brain, it's just training us to go back to that source, right? And that's the sad thing is that for many people that is their source. That's their only source of fulfillment. That's their only source of feeling valued, right? So we got to eliminate the distractions. Turn off the TV. You know, sometimes you got to get desperate, right? You gotta get out of your environment. A good place to go if you're a man, I suggest you go into the woods. You know, if it's not the woods, maybe it's just the basketball court. I mean, when I was going through some stuff a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, you know, I had to go back to where I went as a kid to let go of to do my thinking, right, my active thinking, and that was the basketball court down at Heritage Park. And just shoot baskets and you know, and let God talk to me about the situation, just like He did numerous times when I was a kid. So I just shot baskets by myself and just thought about things and had God speak life into me, encourage me, you know, to press on, encourage me that I had what it takes, encourage me to trust Him and to not be impatient, and also to shine His light on some things that in my life that I needed to make some tough decisions on, you know, in letting go of some selfishness that I had, right? So the second thing is you want to eliminate distractions. The more distractions you can get rid of, the easier it will be to hear from God. And I know some people, I just want to encourage you because I know some people they get scared by that thought, right? For two reasons. One, they're scared to be alone with their own thoughts. Two, they're scared of what God might tell them, right? If they do hear from God. Or I shouldn't say if they do, when they hear from God. I just want to encourage you, like, Just like I said before, God isn't here to condemn you. God isn't here to shame you, to make you feel guilty. That doesn't mean that He won't put His finger on something in your life that, you're doing that's not right. But He's going to do it in a loving way. He's going to do it in, uh, you know, at first He's going to do it in a gentle way. I'll just say that. He's going to encourage you. He's going to lift you up. He's gonna point. He may point something like that out to you, out to you in your life. But then He's gonna speak identity into you. He's gonna tell you how He made you. He's gonna speak to you about the gifts that He's instilled in you that are gonna help you deal with that thing, that are gonna help you to leave that thing, to drop that thing off at His feet, and to walk free. So I just want to encourage you: don't be scared of what God has to say to you. Don't be scared at all. Number 3, get alone. I guess that goes hand in hand with what I was talking about at the tail end of number 2, right? Get alone, whether it's on the basketball court, out in the woods. I don't know, maybe you need to just take a long drive. Whatever that looks like for you, however God leads you to do that. But so I went on this retreat, and I went back and had the pleasure of serving on this retreat for men. It's called Quest. It's 5.5 days where you are chasing after the heart of God and what He has for your life. Now, on this event, they give you the choice of leaving your cell phone in a box. And when I went and when I served, I observed that it was extremely hard for men to do that for a multitude of reasons, right? Some guys were like, well, I might have some emails, or there might be an emergency, or I got this call for work that I gotta take. All those type of things, right? Like are legit. But we were encouraged to put our cell phone in the box and to trust that God would handle anything that came up, because we were taking 5 days out of our time to spend with Him. Now, my attitude going into this was I wanted as much as I could get out of it. So I really personally didn't have a problem putting my phone in the box, because I didn't want anything inhibiting me while I was there. But I understand those fears. I understand the reasons why people wouldn't want to do that. But I say all that to say this: like, not only were those 5.5 days extremely amazing, not only that are they amazing when I go get the pleasure of going back and serve and seeing how God speaks to these guys in the way that He transforms their lives by pointing out all these truths to them and who they are and what they were created to do in life, but the freedom that you experience from not being attached to your cell phone. I mean, I'm speechless as to how that makes you feel. Now, because we're so interconnected these days as a civilization, and that can definitely be hard to do on an everyday basis. But the more you can eliminate those type of distractions, the easier it is to not only make time to spend with God, but to hear from God. So get alone, eliminate distractions. Number 4, huge. Have an expectant attitude, right? When you do these things and you ask God to come spend time with you, and you purposely make a way for that to happen, Expect that He is going to speak to you. And I know God to be faithful, without a shadow of a doubt. And every time that I've had an expectant attitude, I've never been let down. And what comes to mind earlier when I was thinking about this for tonight was, there was this. Let's see if I got that. Yeah, okay. There was a couple years ago. I was going through some stuff, and I was having a hard time, and we got invited to someone else's church, and they were having some special speakers there, and these speakers were going to be going around and giving words of encouragement to people, and I needed a word of encouragement desperately, uh, desperately at that time, and I went with an expectant attitude. I mean, almost like a defiant attitude. Like, God, I need you to speak to me, and I dare you to speak to me tonight. And sure enough, the service started, worship, message, and then the speakers were going around and they were calling people out in the audience and saying, just basically, God has this word for you. God has this for you. God wanted me to tell you this. And they were getting to the end and sitting there and still nothing. And all of a sudden, I see one, because there was 3 different speakers. I see one walking down the aisle, and he just connected eyes with me. And I was wearing this blue shirt, and he was like, "You in the blue shirt, stand up." And he's like, "You're dealing with something right now, and you came here looking for an answer." And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I don't have that answer for you," and kind of laughed. But he's like, "God wants me to tell you something." And I was like, "Okay." And he was like, "If you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat." And that was crazy to me. And the reason why it was crazy to me is because I was looking to do something that would take a lot of courage to do, and I didn't know how it was going to get done, right? The root of this was trust. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know how God was going to do it. And there's a story in the Bible that talks about Jesus walking on water and calling Peter to him, and Peter walking on water, and him trusting God and getting out of the boat to do that. And then when he took his eyes off God, basically stopped trusting God, he started to sink. And I had been reading that. And so that word was important to me because, one, it not only confirmed what I had been reading and dealing with, but two, encouraged me as the message of the story does, to just trust God, that He's got it, and He's calling me out of the boat to trust Him. And I stood up a minute ago to get this book, because there is actually a book written by John Ortberg, I think is his name. And it says, if you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. And I picked that up after being there because I thought it would be an appropriate book to read, and it was, and it was very it was what I needed. On top of that encouraging word, so have an expectant attitude when you ask your Father, your good Father, to come spend time with you and to speak with you, and see what happens. See what gift He has for you at that time. And I don't know where you're at in your life. If you're away from God, okay. I was at that point a few times in my life. You know, the cool thing is that all you do is got to turn back around, and God's waiting right there. He's waiting for you to ask to spend time with Him, to let Him in. He's faithful, and He will come and visit you, my friends. So that is tonight's Sunday sermon. I love you guys. I hope you have a good night. If anybody needs anything, holler at me. Chuck, if you're still watching this thing, get back to me. Other than that, I will see you guys tomorrow for My Life Monday. Have a great night.